excited about this. And so some of you know, not this past week, but the week before, I was able to go to Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, to go to the Global Awakening Pastors and Leaders Conference, and it was just great to be there for 4 days. And one of the speakers recommended a book, and so I went and I got it, and there was a story in there I thought fit so perfectly with the text for today. And so the story is a woman by the name of Kaisa from Finland. And so she was a graduate of the ministry school there. And one of the things I've learned about the Holy Spirit, if you have a Holy Spirit-oriented school, you're going to have people from all over the world, because the Holy Spirit unites people. And so you're going to have people from all over the world. And that's how they operate there at Global Awakening. And so anyways, Kaisa, when she was in 1998, she was radically saved, gave her life to Christ, and then about a year after that, she began to sense a call to global missions, particularly to the nation of China. And she didn't know anybody in China, so she started talking to different contacts, nobody in China. Eventually someone said, yeah, I know a missionary that's way out on the western, far out western side of China called the Tibetan Plateau, like way out there. She said, okay, and she kind of felt like, I think this is the connection that God has for me with this particular woman that's a missionary there in China. And as she was praying about what she should do in China, she started to sense that she's supposed to help out an orphanage. She's supposed to help the orphans. And so she contacted this woman way out there in the Tibetan Plateau, far out west in China. And she says, are there any orphanages in the area where you are? And the woman said, yes, there is one, but the odds of you getting in are very slim, because the BBC, the British news outlet, they had just done some investigative reporting in the orphanages in China to expose how bad the conditions were. And so the orphanage were saying, we're no Westerners, no foreigners are allowed in here. We don't want you coming in and just giving us bad press, because the situation was really bad in the orphanages there. They weren't doing anything to help the kids get placed in homes, food, everything. It was just really bad. And so anyways, Kaisa asked his contact, well, can you give me the information of that orphanage? He said, yeah, you can try, but the situation. And so she contacted the orphanage, and they said, yeah, you can come. You can come and volunteer. So she's 27 years old. It's 2000, and she's ready to go to China. And she just left a really good job there at her hometown in Finland, and she moved out of her apartment, moved all of her stuff into her parents' home. And in May, she gets an email from the new director of this orphanage in China, and she says, you can't come. We're not taking foreigners. She said, oh gosh, I just quit my job. I just moved all my stuff. I told everybody I was going to China. I got some support. What do I do? What do I do? And so she prayed about it, and she thought, I'm still going to go to China. And so she connected with a medical missions team that was in that region of China around where that orphanage was. And she said for a month, she just traveled around with them and just served and helped however she could. She said the last day of their time in that region of China, one of the members of the team just so happened to say, I'm going to that orphanage, and I'm going to drop off some clothes and supplies. They weren't allowing Westerners to come in and work, but they were taking stuff. They were taking supplies. And she said, I want to go. I want to see that orphanage that had said I could come, then said I couldn't. I want to see. I just want to see. And so she goes and sees the kids, and boy, it's hard to see. How many of you have seen some things that are hard to see? I know some of you had some hard stuff out there in the world. And she sees it, and her heart goes out to these kids anyways. And then she sees this woman who's kind of standing there, like she's kind of in charge or something. And someone says, that's the new director that told you couldn't come. And Kaisa thought, well, my last day, it's worth a shot. She says, my name is Kaisa. I'm from Finland. I'm here to help. I would love to volunteer at your orphanage. I'll clean toilets. I'll scrub floors. I'll do anything you need for free. And she said the woman looked at her like she was kind of hypnotized for a while. And she says, when can you start? Free help, right? So she's there for 6 months, and she is so dark. It's so depressing. No effort was being made to connect these kids with an adoption agency. She thought, man, at least few of them could have a better hope than just being stuck in this orphanage with these conditions, and then you're 18, 17, and just out in the world on your own with no support. That's a hard life, right? And so from time to time, she would bring up to this director, there are adoption agencies, and she gave him her information, said, you could connect the kids with an adoption agency. And she said every time she did that, it seemed like this lady didn't care, didn't pay attention. Didn't care. Okay, so was there 6 months, and then she goes back to Finland. She said, I felt like a loser. She said, I wondered if this whole thing about going to China was just my own imagination. She said, God, what was that all about? All of that effort and moving halfway across the world for half a year and all of this stuff, and what was accomplished? Those kids are there, stuck in that orphanage. And yeah, I played with them and showed love, but years from now, what's the impact going to be? What's the impact going to be? Have you ever been in a situation like that where you long to make an impact for God, and what you were seeing was so minimal, and your heart was just crying out, God, I want to do more. I want to accomplish more for your kingdom. And you felt frustrated, and it felt hard, and you felt like you weren't making the impact that you would want to make with your life. Well, today we are looking at a passage in the book of Ecclesiastes that American writer Tom Wolfe calls the highest flower of poetry, eloquence, and truth, the single greatest piece of writing I have known. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem, so beautiful, in fact, the Byrds, the band in 1965, turned it into a song called Turn, Turn, Turn. Anybody remember that? You date yourself, okay? The younger people I don't know what they're talking about, and some of us are like, yeah, I've heard it before. And I wonder if God got the royalties for that song, because it's his lyrics. They just used the words that he had inspired centuries before. And so let's hear it. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. A beautiful poem, but over the years, well-meaning Christians have misinterpreted this, and they've misinterpreted it this way, that you need to discern the season of you're in and live well in that. That's true, we ought to do that. But that's not what this poem is all about. It's about something quite different. It's that we look at our lives and there's all these things that don't seem to connect and they don't seem to make sense. A time to mend and a time to tear and a time to love and a time to hate. And it doesn't make sense to us. From our human perspective, there's so much in our life that doesn't seem connected and it doesn't make sense. And we don't see how it's making an impact in the world. And so biblical scholars say that the key to understanding this poem are the next few verses, the context. When you're interpreting the Bible, the number one rule of Bible interpretation is the context. What's in front and what's after the text, the context. And so Ecclesiastes 3:9-11 says, "What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end." And so we look at our hands, we look at our work. And so often we may feel like my work really isn't making much of an impact on others and the world. What do workers gain from their toil? The author of Ecclesiastes says, I don't see how my work is making much of an impact in the world. But then we look at our hearts. We look at our hearts. He has set eternity in their hearts. We have eternity set into our hearts. We have this desire within us to make an impact in the world and in the lives of others. Andrew DeBalco said this, we have an unslaked craving for transcendence. He has set eternity in our hearts. Yet we look at our minds, it says, no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Sometimes we look at our minds and we can't see how our lives are making much of an impact for God. And then we look at God. It says he has made everything beautiful in its time. He sees what we don't see. So the Old Testament professor, Derek Kidner, says, imagine God as the grand weaver. Anyone ever seen that? Or at least on TV, you've seen a weaver weave a loom, okay? They got all the thread. And so here is God, and he's the grand weaver, the master weaver. And in our lives, he's weaving this beautiful tapestry. And in the way our lives connect with others, if you imagine our life is just one thread, he's weaving it this way and that way, and it's connecting to all these other threads. And we as humans, it's like we're underneath the weaver's loom. And we're looking, and all we see is a bunch of disconnected threads this way and that. And every once in a while in our lives, we see, oh, well, that's connected to that. Because some of us, as I was speaking, you're thinking, well, I do see how my life has made an impact in a lot of ways. That's true. But you're still under the weaver's loom, and you're just seeing this little string here and that little string there. But he sees the whole thing. Our perspective is so limited compared to the infinite God. One of the things that God wants us to get from this message, from this text, is just be in awe of his greatness. So amazing. And so we're under that weaver's loom, and we don't see, but he sees. And so when we struggle, feeling like our lives aren't making an impact, yet we have eternity in our hearts, we trust him. That, Father, you can see what I can't see. Too often in our humanity, we want to see it. But that's not faith, is it? Now, faith is seeing all the results and the impact, right? No. Now, faith is the evidence of things not seen. Our faith is in him, the living God, who's weaving this. And so, does everybody know what the Sistine Chapel is? It's got that chapel. We're almost, this is an awesome building. We're almost there compared to the Sistine Chapel. They might have a little bit on us. Give us a month. There's a board meeting tomorrow. We got big plans. This is beautiful, beautiful. Anybody been there? You been to the Sistine Chapel? Anybody? I've seen it on TV. Oh, we've got somebody. Okay. It's beautiful. Just imagine we're in the Sistine Chapel, on the ceiling, it's this beautiful, beautiful masterpiece of art that just stretches on and on and on. Just picture in your mind you're there. And then you see this little tiny moving dot up there, and it's a fly. William Irvin says that is a great picture of this passage in Ecclesiastes. We're like that fly. This is not a compliment. We see, I see a little bit of what God is doing because the gray is connected to the red here and the blue. And there's something going on. And we think, yeah, I can kind of see. You don't see the whole picture. We're just like a fly on the Sistine Chapel, and our human perspective in this life is so small. We can't handle it. His intellect is so far beyond ours. Yet he sees this great, big, huge masterpiece that he's painting. His master design. And so we trust him. We trust him that God, you are making an impact in our lives that is far beyond what we can see. I think this is going to be one of the funnest things about eternity. God will say, what are you doing for the next 200,000 years? Nothing, I did a lot. Golf I'm done with, baseball, swimming, let's do this. And he's going to say, okay, for the next 200,000 years, just sit down with me, and I'm going to show you all of the ways that I use your life to make an impact in all these ways that you didn't see. I think after the end of that 200,000 years, you'll be happy, right? Don't get scared. There'll be bathroom breaks. Some people are worried that heaven's not going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Don't worry. Yeah, it's going to be awesome, right? So many different things. Our human perspective is so limited, we sometimes need help just to grasp a little bit of what God sees. So I found some things from social science that might help us. So I came across this term, adjacent possible. It was made popular by Stuart Kaufman, the adjacent possible. We've all seen this at work in our lives, the adjacent possible. Someone who does something that makes something possible for somebody else, but they had no idea. They weren't intending to do that at all. It just was made possible. So Elisha Otis, in 1853, he invented the elevator safety brake because nobody wanted to buy his elevators because it was just a rope, and if the rope snapped, then they're like, we're not getting in your elevators, dude. He just wants to sell elevators, right? So he goes to the World's Fair, and he says, I have a brake for elevators. Now, before this time, the highest building in New York City was only 5 stories because nobody wanted to climb stairs every day more than 5. That's it. It's as high as it was. And so he goes to the World's Fair, and he puts himself way, 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 way up high. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, watch. And they're like, oh. And he takes these big scissors or something, he cuts the rope, and he goes, chung. And it worked. You know, he believed in his invention. So then they started selling elevators. You know what happened? Skyscrapers. He wasn't trying to build skyscrapers. He made it possible, had no idea, didn't intend that. Another story, Willis Carey, he just had this idea, and maybe God will give us some God ideas like this. So it's 1902, he's just sitting at a train station waiting for his train, and he sees this fog, and he thinks to himself, I wonder if I could convert fog and recycle it to cool a building. Oh, it's a fascinating idea. So he went on to invent air conditioning. Thank you, Willis, right? Well, he didn't intend this at all, but he made Florida possible. Because before then, nobody wanted to live in Florida. It was too hot all the time. There's only 1 million people. Now it's the 3rd most populated state in America because you can have air conditioning. You know, Mark Batterson in one of his books says when he was in 8th grade, his parents decided to change churches, and they started going to Calvary Church in Naperville, Illinois. He said, I was in 8th grade. He says, I saw the pastor up there talking, you know. He said, I didn't care if the pastor had a daughter. I didn't know if the pastor had a daughter. I didn't care. I was just into my life. He said, but I eventually cared because I met the pastor's daughter, and we got married, and we had 3 kids, and because my parents moved to this church, and then I met the pastor's daughter, and then this has happened, none of this all would have been possible. None of it would have been possible. So God has done that in your life in all sorts of different ways for you. He has moved and shifted people around so that things would be made possible for you that wouldn't otherwise have been possible. We thank God for the drive and the hard work and the effort that He's given us to do. But I think if we could see, we would say, oh my gosh, so much of my life was made possible by the Father orchestrating all this. And God is doing that with you. He's making all of these things possible that wouldn't otherwise be possible for other people. You see, whenever we hear about something about how our lives have made something possible for someone else when we didn't even really intend it, that is just like 1 in a million of how many times God does that. He just allows us to see just a fraction of when He's at work in that way. Another thing that'll help us to see this is the concept of social networks. So social networks, social scientists say, are super connected. We're all way more connected than you might realize. So one statistician said that the average American knows 611 people. So you probably know around 611 people. They know you by name, face. You know them by name, face, 611. And so we often think that my impact must be limited to the people that I know because that's the only people that, I could see the impact in. Now, the social scientist James Fowler says they can prove that your impact is not just to people you know, your friends, but your friends' friends and your friends' friends' friends. And they can prove that. So you have, at minimum, an impact on 8,000 people. That's awesome. Your life is making an impact. 8,000 people right now. And you don't have to know a lot of people because of the. Now, Keith can help me with this, but I was talking to Keith about this a while back. You had a friend at your work, a coworker that you kind of were praying with and got him excited about going to church, right? And if I don't ruin my illustration, but if this is right, you said it was after I invited you to the global conference. Is that right? Something with that? Okay. So he told me this, and it blew my mind, if it's right, that I invited Keith to the global conference, and that kind of fired him up. He was fired up before, but it extra fired him up, right? And then you got that guy fired up at your work because of that. So you see the chain reaction? I had no idea there was a real person at Keith's work that I had made an impact on by simply inviting Keith to go to a conference. This kind of thing happens all the time. You just don't always see it. You don't always see it. We only hear, again, 1 in a million times God is doing this, making an impact through you to this person, to that person, to that person, and to that person. God is making an impact. And so your impact isn't limited to 8,000 people. There's people on the other side of the world you may be making an impact of. Anyone ever heard of 6 degrees of separation? You're only separated, but you know what I'm talking about? The 1960s, Stanley Milgram gave a bunch of people a letter and said, send it to someone that you think can get to this certain businessman in Boston. And they said, well, I don't know that businessman in Boston. It's just some random guy in Boston, but they sent a letter to a person they thought might get close to that, and it only took 6 people to get there. So they recreated this experiment in 2002, Duncan Watts did, with 98,000 participants with email. And they had people try to find an archival inspector in Estonia. That's probably hard to find. Probably has a lot of friends, but I'm almost thinking maybe he might not. An archival inspector in Estonia. I'm thinking, anyways. A technology consultant in India, a policeman in Australia, a veterinarian in the Norwegian army. He says, email somebody that you know that might get close to knowing them. He said, on average, 6 people you can get to them. 6 people. 6 people. You have no idea. One researcher who's doing work in this, in the 1950s, he said he was just at a hospital and he overheard 2 people talking. And he said there was a patient from America and one from China. And they just put in a room together. And the Chinese guy said, I'm from China. And the American guy says, I've only known one person ever from China. He was so-and-so from Shanghai. And the guy said, oh, that's my uncle. Out of this mess, who's ever had something crazy like that happen, right? Yeah. You did. Just on vacation. Just tell it,
We ran into somebody. We stopped at a hotel for the night. We drove halfway to Myrtle Beach because we had our granddaughter.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to make her drive 10.5 hours. So we stopped at a random hotel, and there was an Indian man who owned the hotel, and Dan was kind of talking to him, and he's like, well, we build, like restaurants and tea shops. It was one of the cousins of one of the guys we've already worked for.
Oh my gosh. In what city?
Was it North Carolina or West Virginia?
Yeah. In Virginia.
Yeah. It was just on the way. We just stopped at a random hotel, a random Indian man.
Yeah.
He heard his last name, and he's like, oh, it's funny, we do, these tea shops and these restaurants and so. And he's like, that's my cousin.
It's just wild, yeah. When it was like 2006, me and my wife were going out to Missouri, and where I was at the time, it was a church that was, it was on this road, and there was 3 churches. So I got to know the Baptist guy, Kevin. He was like a buddy of mine. We do stuff together. And so we're on our way to Missouri, and we're 3 hours outside of where we live, like past Chicago. And I go into a gas station, and Kevin's coming out. I mean, I was just in and out, and he's in and out, and there's one gas station. I'm like, how is that even possible? And so you have no idea. You have no idea. This dates me a little bit, but when I first started in the ministry, I was at a little church called Faith Bible Church in Prague, Oklahoma, and the pastor trusted me to preach on Sunday nights and experiment on his people once a month, Sunday nights, okay? So they had tapes, not CDs, tapes, where they would record the messages. And I had this friend from a college in Kentucky that I met. She was from Canada, but anyways, she found out about it. And she says, oh, you have tapes now? I'm like, I sent her some tapes. And then she said, my husband loves your tapes. He's listened to them several times. I'm like, so some dude from Mississauga, Canada, that's like listening to this tape, you have no idea, people, the impact that he is making with your life. And the other thing about it is it fascinates him too. Do you know that? God enjoys this. God enjoys it. Dallas Willard said one of the things about God is he gets a kick out of doing this. Look what I'm going to do with Pam. Look what I'm going to do with Dan. And he's orchestrating all of this. We just need to have faith within him and know whenever he allows in his great mercy for us just to see one little glimpse of it, it is just a glimpse. There is so much more being woven in this tapestry, being painted in this great picture than you and I can ever comprehend. We just have to trust and be in awe of him. And so that's what our text says. It goes on and it says, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. And so our response to all of this should be trust. Whenever you feel the enemy say to you, your life isn't making an impact, call him a liar. He doesn't bother people who aren't making an impact. Whatever he says, it's just the opposite happening. You could even flip it on him like, thank you for reminding me of the impact that I had, because I wouldn't be feeling this oppression if I wasn't making an impact, right? He's not that creative. The only way he can try to stop your impact is by making you think you're not having one, right? That's all he can do. And so we trust that God is working. And then we're happy. It says to be happy. Scientists have proven this. The Bible teaches it. The key to true and full happiness is meaning. You can't get it from stuff. You can't even get it from experience. It's this sense of meaning. If you and I live with this reality that God is using my life in ways far beyond what I can see, man, your life is full of meaning and it contributes greatly to your happiness. And then we would do good. We wouldn't get discouraged. We wouldn't give up. We would keep going. Because we would know whenever it looks like we're not making an impact, it's just an opportunity to show God something he really likes, and that's faith. I'm going to keep going, God. I'm going to keep pursuing what you have told me to do, even when I don't see the impact, because without faith, is it impossible to please him? And I'm going to give him faith right now, right? And then we would be in awe of God. It says that we would fear him. So God, this is amazing that my life is caught up into this grand thing that you're doing and connecting these people and making this impact. All of these things that is so far beyond what my mind can comprehend. And so I just have a few things to talk about and then we'll land here. And so God is weaving your character into his master plan. Your character is making more of an impact than you realize. So Jonathan Haidt coined this term moral elevation. He said he can prove it. When you witness a good act, someone sacrificially loving, caring, helping somebody else, someone being courageous for somebody else, you're not involved at all. You're just watching this happen, okay? Maybe it's a coworker at work and you're like, man, that person really took the blame to help that other person, because I know my boss would have but look, that was a beautiful thing. When you see that happen, he says there's something that happens to your physical body. You actually feel warmer and elevated, and it inspires you to do good, okay? So God uses you in your life, in the character that you have, your patience, your joy, your peace, your compassion, and sacrifice to other people. He's using it right now, not just to impact the person that we're reaching out to, because our limited human perspective, we're always thinking about just the person we're helping. Is it making a difference with this person? But God is watching. They're watching you help at the soup kitchen or help the people or whatever it is, and that's inspiring other people. And so after 9/11, the American Journal of Medicine said that blood donations went up by 2 to 5 times throughout the U.S. So why is it? Moral elevation. People were watching emergency personnel risk their lives to help the people that were trapped in 9/11. Now, do you think that a firefighter rushing into this, knowing this could cost me my life, but there are innocent people who are hurting and need me to lay it all on the line. Do you really think a firefighter was thinking in that moment as they're running with all their gear, and to boot, I'm going to inspire someone in Omaha to donate blood to help someone with anemia. This will be great. They weren't. No. But it was happening. God was using that, right? And so in the same way, just from your life, other people are watching, and it's inspiring, and it can set off this chain of events. They even found a study of living people that had donated their kidneys, and they found a 10-string link of unrelated people. One person was inspired by the first person, who was inspired by the second person, all the way down to 10. So one person donating their kidney not just helped one person, but all of these other people as they set that in motion. And so God was doing that. You know, I heard this story, Wayne Dyer. He said that one day he was in New York. He was going to fly to Greece to do this run. Anyways, the flight was delayed by 8 hours. He said everybody was really grumpy. They're moaning and groaning, walking around, trying to get a different flight. They can't, you know. He says, besides for one very elderly Greek woman who's just sitting there all calm for 8 hours. She didn't seem worried at all. He's like, what is the deal with this person? You know, he's frustrated. She's not. And then finally, it's time to board the flight. And he sits down just across the aisle from her, just so happens to. And she just turns and smiles, and that's it. He says, I kid you not, for 13 hours, that's all she just sat there, very calm. It's like everybody else is fidgeting. They're so ready for this thing to be over with. He said the patience was incredible in this woman. She's just real calm, this elderly little woman. He goes, he said, she didn't even get up for a bathroom break. He's like, who does this? And he says then when the flight landed and she got off the plane, she's Greek because that's part of their culture. She saw her family. She said she instantly became a different person. She just, bam, she's like happy and laughing and hugging and kissing. Oh no, she's just so full of joy. He said, 20 years later, whenever I feel impatient, I remember that little Greek lady. She had no idea that just sitting on a plane, being calm, because it's not going to do any good to be impatient, would have inspired that dude. He would put it in his book, and now we're talking about it in Piqua. And neither do you. Neither do you. Your character, the way that God is using your character. God is weaving your words into his master plan. Trista Belmont tells a story when she was in her early 20s. She was very discouraged with her life. She was a dance teacher part-time, and her grandmother had just died, and her car had broke down. She's very depressed, and a friend was taking her to work, and then her friend said, I can't take you to work. And so she just, I'm going to walk to work. I'm going to walk to the dance studio. So she walks over this bridge, and she says, you know, I don't want to walk any farther. And she just stands at the edge of the bridge. And she says, I was done. I just had to have the only thing keeping me from jumping off the bridge and killing myself was just the guts to do it, because I didn't want to live anymore. And she's contemplating this, and a driver just goes by because it's busy, because stop. A driver goes by. She says, I never saw him. I didn't see the car. I didn't see the person. But they said, don't jump. Don't jump. And she had this epiphany, and she said, you know, if some stranger cares enough to tell me not to jump, I think maybe my life is worth something. And she went to therapy, she got her life together, and now she tells that story to other people. You never know. You never know. Pete Gregg tells the story of this young guy, Gareth, who started going to his church. And anyways, he said Gareth was just a seeker. He wasn't sure if God was real or not, but he was interested in spiritual things. And so anyways, he said Gareth had this part-time job at a home improvement store, and he would stock shelves. And one morning, Gareth woke up, and he said, God, if you're real, please give me a sign today. And so he goes to work, and he's stocking the shelves. And he says, this little old lady, quite out of nowhere, just walks through his aisle and says, young man, God loves you. That simple phrase, he went back to the church. He said, God is real. He heard my prayer. I know that there's no way. He goes, I think this lady might have been an angel. And he was completely ignited in his faith. See, the power of the prophetic sometimes isn't in how accurate what you say is, but what God has done leading up to it, right? And so those simple words changed his life forever. And so you never know who needs to hear what you're saying and how God is weaving that into his master plan. All right, so whatever happened to Kesa? Remember, we left her. She was back home in Finland, and she was like, God, did I just make all this up? Was I even supposed to go to China? What is this all about? I mean, she was a fairly new Christian, too. She's processing all of this, and a few months later, this lady sends her a letter, says, are you the Kesa that went to this orphanage? I've been contacting all the cases that I know in Finland. Is it you? She says, if so, call me. So she calls her and says, yeah, I'm that Kesa. She says, what do you want me to call you for? She said, I just adopted a beautiful baby girl from China. Way out on the western end of China, the Tibetan plateau. And the director of the orphanage said it was because of this person named Kesa. Is that you? Did you volunteer there? She said, yeah, it was me. She goes, well, I'm actually in Finland. And so she drove the other side of the world. She drove all the way up to this place in Finland. She said, oh my gosh, this is one of the little girls that I used to play with all the time when I was volunteering there. And she's in a home. And she said, that wasn't it. Then other people started finding her and saying, we've adopted kids from that orphanage. And the director said, it was because of you. And Kesa said, I didn't think anything I said was getting through to that woman, but it was just a little bit after I left, she connected with an adoption agency, and she said, this blew my mind. She says, way out there in China, she says, there were 2 kids placed in my hometown in Finland. So from time to time when I'm out and about, I see that. Now, what if that first person never would have been able to reach her? Would she have still made the impact? Would it still be real? Would those kids still be in those loving homes and have a different life and be able to hear the gospel and all of the things? It still would have been there if Kesa wouldn't have heard it. And so it is so often in our lives, we don't always hear the story, but we trust that God is working out his purposes through our lives. If the worship team would come, I'm going to pray.